Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhigyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakohakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigama Kalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We now enter the 7th chapter of the 8th Skandha of Bhagavatam. We are in the middle of the famous story of the churning of the ocean of milk, Samudra Manthan. We saw how Mount Mandara was brought to the shore of the ocean, and Vasuki the serpent was brought as the churning rope. Now we continue. Shuka Brahma Rishi says Vasuki was brought to be the churning rope, and with great joy now that the mountain as the churning rod and Vasuki the serpent as the churning rope is all set, the gods and the demons, that is the Devatas and the Daityas, they were fully enthusiastic because they were all motivated to bring out the nectar that was promised to come out from this ocean. So they prepared for this uphill task, and they started to go about it. And as they did so, Sri Hari, the Supreme Being, as we saw, he came mounted on Garuda to help bring the mountain to the seashore, and he himself grasped the forefront of the snake, the serpent Vasuki, the head of it, and the Devatas followed him, which left the tail part to the demons. And the demons did not like it because they thought it was a disrespect that they would be at the tail while the Devatas would be at the forefront. So it again shows how the demoniac quality is always caught in ego and comparison, and that's what they were engaged in. They did not realize that the front side of the snake is actually the more dangerous side because it's got the poison. The tail is the safer side. But just because Sri Hari went to the front portion and the Devatas followed it, and they were sent to the tail, instead of recognizing the benefit of it, they only found it to be an insult to them. So this is again symbolic of how the ego always takes offense at anything, and that's what they did. And therefore, because they complained, the Lord graciously allowed them to come to the front side, which in fact was to their detriment, because the poison comes out from the serpent, of course, from the mouth, which is in the front. So they came to the front, and the Devatas went to the tail. And with this position all set, they began churning. And as they started churning, what happened was the Mount Mandara, being a very heavy mountain with nothing to support it at the bottom, it started sinking. So this mountain, as heavy as it was of course not having any support, and the ocean being deep, it was only going further and further down, and therefore they were not able to hold it to churn anymore. And because of that, they were all getting frustrated and dejected that the mountain is gradually slipping down. Perceiving this, instantly the Lord took the form of a tortoise. So this is the reason why the Lord appears as a tortoise. It's called Kurma Avatar, also called as Kachapa. So it says, Kritva Vapuh Kachapam Adbhutam Mahat Pravishya Toyam Girim Ujjahara. So the Lord took the form of a tortoise, a wonderful tortoise, giant size. It is no ordinary tortoise, because this tortoise has to support on the shell of its back the entire mountain. So he took a wonderful form, a giant tortoise that is larger than the giant mountain, so that the whole mountain was supported on the back. And by doing so, he entered the water beneath the mountain so that the whole mountain was supported from the bottom. And that is why he is called as Kachapa Avatar. Kachapa is another word for tortoise. So that's why there is a famous Dashavatar Shlokam where this avatar is glorified as Keshava Dhirita Kachapa Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare. So Kachapa and Kurma are the same. So he took the form of a tortoise, a Kurma, and thereby he supported the entire mountain on his back. And while supporting the mountain on the back, the demons and the devatas were now able to start the churning. And for the Supreme Lord, the Infinite Lord, the entire mountain was simply like a scratch on the back, it says. So his Adi Kachapo Mene Anga Kanduyana Aprameyaha. So Aprameyaha means infinite, immeasurable. The immeasurable Supreme Lord who became the Adi Kachapaha, the first giant tortoise. For him, this entire pastime was that is the whole mountain, the supremely heavy mountain on his back was simply like a small scratch on the back. And therefore the Kurma Avatar, the Kachapa Avatar is thus manifested, and he is supporting the whole mountain on his back. And meanwhile, the Lord was also present on the top. So this is the bewildering aspect of the Supreme Being. He can be present in multiple forms at the same time. He is not restricted to any form at any time, and therefore he is already churning in his original form at the front with the devatas behind him, as we saw, with his many arms, while he also simultaneously took the form of tortoise to support the mountain from the bottom. And it is said that the Lord expanded on the top so that he could press the mountain from the top as well. So there was the need for the mountain to be pressed from both sides so that it can be an effective churning rod. So he was pressing it up from the below by being the tortoise, and he was pressing it down from above with his own hand by taking a giant form. So he was simultaneously with multiple forms present at the same time with this bewildering potency, and therefore being able to press it from the top and also push it up from the bottom with two different forms, and thereby the mountain was now a suitable churning rod. And seeing this glorious pastime, it is said that there was flowers showered from the heavens. Everyone was in great wonder praising it. All the celestial beings were so speechless and so gratified looking at this wonderful pastime of the Lord, and they were showering flowers from the top. It is said that Brahma and Shiva, in their respective abodes, were also very pleased knowing of this pastime. So, as we saw, Brahma, along with Shiva, came to the Lord to appeal on behalf of the Devas, and once the Lord acquiesced and this whole pastime started, Brahma and Shiva went to their abodes while the Devas were all engaged in this pastime with the Lord. And therefore, when the vision of this pastime reached Shiva and Brahma, they also glorified him. And thus, the Lord continued with this pastime, and it is said very beautifully. Again, it's so symbolic. He says, the supreme all pervading Lord, Vishnu literally means the one who pervades the whole universe. He entered the demons in his demoniac aspect, and he entered the devas in his sattvic aspect. So again, this is the bewildering aspect, which is the all-encompassing nature of the Lord. So the demons get their strength from the same source from which the devas get their strength. So the good and the evil are coming from the same source, and it is all a pastime, a leela of the Lord. So there is no force that can counter the Lord because everything comes forth from Him. And again, this is emphasized here by Shuka Brahma Rishi. He says so beautifully that the Supreme Lord Vishnu entered the demons to give them more demoniac strength, and he entered the Devas to give them more sattvic strength so that both can enthusiastically churn the rod. So, this is all again symbolic because when we have this churning of the mind through meditation, we again find that both the good and evil tendencies seem to get strengthened. As we churn, we find that there is a lot of good tendencies, good thoughts come up, but also we find that many of the negative thoughts are seemingly strengthened. They seem to be getting only stronger rather than getting weaker initially. And there seems to be an intense struggle between the two, both of them getting strengthened. And that's exactly what is symbolized by this, that the Lord enters both the demons to strengthen their demoniac aspect, and enters the Devas to strengthen their sattvic aspect. And he is also making the mountain stubborn. He is making the serpent Vasuki strong and pain free, even though he is used for being the churning rope. So, with all this wonderful pastimes of making every aspect of it, so again we can see in this way Shukha Brahmarishi describes how everything is essentially the action of the Lord, the activity of the devas, the activity of the demons, the activity of the mountain as the churning rod, the activity of Vasuki as the churning rope. Everything is getting its potency from the same Supreme Lord. And on top of it, he also enters into the same pastime in his own divine form as the tortoise to support the mountain, which is an avatar, a descent, and also as his form of many arms to support the mountain from the top. So, this mysterious vision gives us the essence of the whole creation itself. In our mind, everything, the essence, the base of the mind, that which supports it is Him. The good thoughts and the evil thoughts are also strengthened both by Him, and the churning of them through meditation also happens through Him, and that which supports it from the top by giving the energy to continue the churning is also Him. So, this is what is all symbolized so beautifully by this description of Shukha Brahmarishi, that in this pastime everything is done by Him through His agency, and therefore this wonderful pastime is going on, and it is causing the mountain to be stirred now with great force, that all the creatures in the ocean are all going hither and thither, it is said. And the serpent Vasuki is also emitting poisonous fumes. And sure enough, the demons who insisted on being in the front near the mouth are now covered with this smoke, and they are not able to even see clearly, whereas the devas are not affected by it so much, and there is also a cooling rain on them. So all this is going on, but then what they find is they all started this expedition to get the nectar out, but there is no nectar coming. They are struggling and struggling, no nectar is coming. The Lord Himself is doing the churning as well, and He is holding the serpent. It is said beautifully, He is describing him as Meghashyamaha. He is his original form. He is there in the top, churning as we saw, while he is also in the form of the tortoise, supporting in the bottom. He is in his original form, Meghashyamaha, means his dark bluish cloud like color, and with golden silk and wonderful garland of forest flowers, Vanamala, and his glorious transcendent form is there, churning the mountain with the devas behind him, and the asuras, the demons on the other side, and it is causing the whole ocean to stir, but no nectar is coming. But to their surprise, what comes out is a poison called Halahala. This is a deadly poison that comes out, which is very effervescent and very extremely potent and unbearably strong. And they are not able to handle this poison, so they are all running away. And by the direction of the Lord, they all go to Lord Shiva now to take his refuge. So they go to Mount Kailash, where the Supreme Lord is sitting with his divine spouse Uma or Parvati, and they go to get his help, they surrender unto him. So before this, we can now see how this again is symbolic as to first, when one engages in meditation, when the good thoughts and the bad thoughts are both strengthened, initially, instead of getting any bliss, what seems to be coming out is a lot of negativity. There is a lot of disturbance coming out. In fact, one is confronted with the deep buried negative emotions, subconscious memories, all of them come to the surface. Normally, when one is not done any meditation, one is not doing anything, just living unconsciously, then many of these are submerged and they are subconsciously kept in the memory. And of course, they come and strike at times when one is not ready, and that's why people commit abominable acts which even surprise themselves, because they are carrying subconscious memories and desires and fears and so on. But when one engages in meditation, all of them come to the surface at the same time. And while it is a very good thing because bringing them to the surface is the way to get rid of them, when they come to the surface, it's not pleasant to confront all these negative emotions. They look like poison. So that's what is represented by this beautiful pastime, that the poison Halahala comes out instead of nectar in the beginning when the churning is done. Just as all the negative emotions surface instead of peace and bliss first. And now they go to Shiva. So this is the other most wonderful aspect of this chapter and this whole churning pastime, because Shiva is the Adi Guru, he is grace personified, and it is Shiva alone who can take these negative emotions and we have to surrender it unto him. So that's what is beautifully symbolized by this wonderful prayer. Now, all the Devas, all the beings there, they all rush to Lord Shiva and they glorify him. And there is a beautiful prayer now offered to Shiva. It's one of the most wonderful prayers to Shiva, and this is coming in Bhagavatam. They begin by saying, Deva Deva Mahadeva Bhutatman Bhutabhavana. O Lord, O Mahadeva, O soul of all beings, save us. They say, Trahi nah Sharanapannam Strailokya Dahanad Vishat. Save us, we have sought refuge in you, because there is poison spreading from all three directions. They say you are the only one competent to both bind and liberate the whole world. Tvameka Sarva Jagata Ishvaro Bandha Mokshayoho. You are the Lord of both bondage and liberation. Tvam Archanti Koshalah Prapannarti Haram Gurum. You are the original Guru, the first Guru. That's why Shiva is Dakshinamurti, the Adi Guru. And you are the one that all the wise worship surrender unto. They say you undertake through your own Maya, which is of three gunas: creation, maintenance, and dissolution. So the three aspects of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are all coming from the same Supreme Being. So here, what is so important and how beautifully Bhagavatam brings it out is the Supreme Being is both Hari and his expansion Shiva. The Shiva and Hari are non-different because they are simply the same Supreme Being, the Supreme Brahman, and therefore the same glorification that is normally offered in Bhagavatam to Sri Hari is here offered to Shiva, because Shiva is non-different from Sri Hari. So here it says, you take the form of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and you are the Supreme Brahman, the creator of all beings, the Supreme Spirit. They say, Tvam Brahma Paramam Guhyam Sadasad Bhava Bhavanah. The most mysterious, highly confidential truth is that you are the Supreme Being and you have all the potencies, Nana Shakti Bihi, you have all the potencies, and you are Jagadishwaraha, you are the Lord of the universe. They say you are the source of the Vedas, cause of the universe, cause of the three gunas. You bring forth all the senses, the vital airs, the pranas, the subtle elements, time, spirit, will, dharma, truth, matter, everything. So again, we can see how here Shiva is glorified as the supreme source, just as Sri Hari is glorified in many other prayers. Here, the same words are in fact used for Lord Shiva. They are saying that you are the source of the Vedas, source of the universe, source of the gunas, source of the senses, source of the elements, source of time, and source of will. And therefore, they say, your mouth is fire. So, this is in fact the exact prayer that Brahma offered to Lord Sri Hari, the Supreme Being, just a few chapters ago. And the same exact prayer is now offered to Shiva, that your mouth is fire, your feet are the earth, your movement is time, The quarters are your ears, the water is your palate, the sky is your navel, the air is your respiration, your breath is air, the sun is your eyes, the all the jivas are your own ego, the mind, the moon is your mind, the heaven is your head, the mountains are your bones, the oceans are your abdomen, the plants and creepers are the hair on your body, the meters of the Vedas are aspects of your own body, and all of Dharma is your heart. So, again, we see this description is exactly similar to the description given by Brahma to the Supreme Being when he glorified him, when all the Devatas came to Brahma and they went to surrender to the Lord to help them out. And that is how the Lord came and suggested that they go and churn the ocean along with the demons by making friendship with them and cooperating to churn the ocean with Mount Mandara. So, this was done because of the prayer of Brahma, where the same exact glorification was offered. Here it is exactly said again the same way, because the Supreme Being is non different, and Shiva is here seen as the Supreme Being by the Devas. So they say all this exactly as the way Brahma expressed by saying that all the elements are simply the various parts of your cosmic being. And therefore, they continue and say that you are the self effulgent principle, the supreme reality, which is known as Shiva. After they describe all the various aspects of the universe as various parts of Shiva's cosmic body, as we saw the fire as the mouth, the earth as the feet, the directions as the ears, the oceans as the abdomen, the mountains as the bones, and so on, in essence, describing that the whole cosmic body, the infinite cosmic body, is the universe. They conclude that by saying, Yet tat Shivakyam Paramartha Tattvam Deva Swayam Jyotir Avastitiste. So they say that the Paramartha Tattvam, the supreme reality, is what is called as Shiva. Shiva Akyam Paramartha Tattvam. And therefore they say that everything that is there is manifested from you. The three eyes, that Shiva is known to have three eyes with one in the middle of the eyebrows. And they say Netratrayam Sattva Rajas Tamamsi. So the three eyes represent the three gunas of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And therefore they say, you doing so many wonderful actions is no great wonder at all. They say that you have done so many great things, such as killing the Kamadeva. Kamadeva is the one who brings forth lust in the hearts of humans. Kama is lust, and Kamadeva is the one who brings lust, and he was burned by Shiva. It's a beautiful pastime that is described elsewhere. Shiva destroyed the yajna of Daksha. We saw that in the fourth skandha, how Daksha abused Shiva, and Shiva did not mind it at all, but his wife Sati was very disturbed. And when Sati left her body, then Shiva's partial manifestation destroyed the sacrificial performance, the yajna. They say you destroyed the three flying cities. We saw that too. How Tripura, the three cities made by the demon Maya, was destroyed by Shiva with help of Krishna. So they say all these great pastimes are nothing for you because you are of infinite potency, and therefore they imply that the poison now coming out, Halahala, this is also nothing for you because you destroy this universe by reducing it to ashes by simply opening your middle eye at the time of universal dissolution. And therefore they say that you are inaccessible to everyone, whether it be Brahma himself or all the Devatas. Nobody can comprehend you, your reality, because you are beyond all that. And in you, all the differences are cast away because you are the supreme effulgence. They say, Jyotif param yatra rajastamascha sattvam nayat brahma nirasta bhedam. So you are the supreme effulgence, the pure Brahman, from which the three gunas, rajas, tamas, and sattva, come forth, and which is devoid of any differences. All the differences are completely absent. The differences are manifest due to the three gunas, rajas, tamas, and sattva, which come forth from you. But the source of it is the supreme effulgence, Jyotif Param. That supreme effulgence is without any difference, Nirasta Bhedam. It is one unified effulgence. And therefore, they say that nothing is of any great wonder that you are able to do all this. And yet, they say that people unfortunately revile you for various things, and this has been seen even in Bhagavatam already. They say how some people revile you for being in close company with goddess Uma, the consort Parvati. Some people revile you for being in cremation grounds, wearing ashes on the body, and so on. And they do not understand you, and such people are truly shameless. So, this is very true how many revile Shiva without understanding the greatness of Shiva. This is seen in Bhagavatam itself. We saw the two things mentioned here are both having specific examples. We saw how Daksha, who is his own son in law, abused Shiva because Shiva wears ashes on his body, he is in crematorium, and he is having all the various Bhuta Ganas with him and so on. Because of that, Daksha abused him. And similarly, Chitraketu, we saw abuse Shiva very gently, though. He laughed and said, "It is not appropriate that you have Uma sitting on your lap while you are giving a discourse on Dharma." So, if you may remember, this whole episode of Chitraketu becoming Vritrasura happened because of this. Chitraketu, who was a very highly advanced devotee, yet when he came to Kailash, it is said that he saw Shiva giving a beautiful discourse, which is what Shiva is always seen in Kailash. We see many descriptions of how Shiva is sitting beneath a tree, a banyan tree, and giving discourse to all the great sages. And when he was doing so at that particular time, the consort, goddess Uma, was sitting on his lap, and they were holding each other while Shiva was talking to the sages. And this confused Chitraketu because he thought it was inappropriate to do so. So he chastised Shiva, which was extremely wrong for him to do. How can you be so closely holding Uma in embrace in a public when you are talking to all the sages?" And of course, Shiva was very calm, but Parvati was not happy with that, and therefore she cursed that Chitraketu become a demon, and that's how he became Vritrasura. And of course, he fully surrendered to the Lord as Vritrasura and attained the supreme abode. Similarly, in the case of Daksha too, Daksha abused Shiva for wearing ashes and being with Bhutaganas and so on. And in both cases, we can see when Daksha abused Shiva, Shiva did not even stir. He simply remained calm, but his consort Sati, she got disturbed and she left the body, and after that, Daksha was ruined. Similarly, when Chitraketu abused to Shiva remained quiet, it was Parvati who was not happy with that, and she cursed Chitraketu to become a demon. So we see the greatness of Shiva, that he is completely unaffected by people reviling him, criticizing him, chastising him. And that's why the Devatas here say that it is unfortunate that people revile you because they do not understand you. So, this is an important lesson here also, that one ought not to judge anyone, especially those who are very senior, those who are very advanced, those who are totally dedicated even in this world, let alone Shiva, because Shiva represents the Guru Tattva as we saw, and sometimes there is a tendency to judge Guru based on human standards. It is best to not engage in any judgment because we don't know the inner state of the Guru, and therefore to accuse in such materialistic ways, in such limited ways, the activities of Lord Shiva or even the activities of the Guru is not appropriate, is the lesson here. Because we cannot Especially with Shiva, there are many who ask this question as to why is Shiva known as smoking ganja, because many people they imitate Shiva and they smoke ganja on Shivaratri, but they cannot imitate Shiva and take Halahala poison in their mouth. They cannot imitate Shiva and destroy three flying cities. So, one of the important lessons to always keep in mind is we have to listen to the great beings but not try to imitate them. And therefore, those who are deluded, for example, on Shivaratri, they take intoxicating substances and they bring a bad name to Shiva by doing such activities. And here, that is why the Devas say that people shamelessly either accuse you or they try to imitate you, and both are wrong because you are beyond all that. You are the supreme being who is taking this special form and engaging in mysterious pastimes in order to bring the wisdom of the supreme reality to everyone. And that is not understood by those who either criticize you or try to imitate you. So, this important teaching is for everyone, that it's not just with Shiva but with anyone, especially who is engaged in sadhana, who is senior and advanced, and who is a guru or who is in a exalted position, to simply judge them for some by some yardstick which one may have based on worldly standards is extremely inappropriate. And that is also the lesson out of this particular prayer. So, thus glorifying Shiva, they say nobody can actually comprehend you, even Brahma cannot comprehend you. So, who are we, the Devas, to comprehend you? Only you can take care of us. So, they are making this wonderful prayer also to please Shiva and hoping that he will take care of the situation where this poison Kala Kuta or Halahala has come out. So, looking at this and looking at their distress, Shiva, who is full of compassion, speaks now. Sarva Bhuta Suhrud Deva Idamaha Satim Priyam. He looks at Bhavani, his sweet consort Uma, and he speaks with great love. That's what it says. Sarva Bhuta Suhrud, one who is always compassionate towards all beings, speaks to his sweet consort, Priyam Satim Idam Aha. He speaks thus. How does he speak? He says, "O Bhavani, please see this. It's so distressing to see such calamity come upon all these creatures because of the poison that's come out. We have to take care of them because it is the duty of anyone who's got any power to protect the afflicted." So it's a wonderful teaching that's given here by Shiva. He says, Yetavanhi Prabhor Artho Yad Dina Paripalanam. In anyone's situation, anywhere, if we see someone who is weaker than us, Dina means weaker, to protect the weak is the responsibility of the strong. The strong ought not to ever take advantage of the weak. Instead, they have to actually protect the weak. That's what Shiva says here. The duty of the strong is to protect the weak, and here they have come to me, O Bhavani. Bhavani is another beautiful name for Mother Parvati. Bhava means Shiva, the one who brings forth everything, Bhava, and Bhavani is the consort of Shiva. And Shiva, that's why there is a beautiful prayer for Shiva, which glorifies Shiva, which also brings forth all these qualities. The prayer says, Karpura Gauram Karunavataram Samsara Saram Bhujagendra Haram Sada Vasantam Hridayara Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami. So Shiva is Karpura Gauram. He is known as white in complexion. Karunavataram. He is an embodiment of compassion. Samsara Saram. He is the essence of this universe. Bhujagendra Haram. He wears the garland of snake. Sada Vasantam Hridayara Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami. He resides always in the heart, in the lotus of the heart, and he resides along with Bhavani. That is where the name Bhavani is used. Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami. So I offer my obeisance to Shiva along with Bhavani, situated in the lotus of the heart. So that Bhavani, Uma, Parvati, the mother of the universe, is addressed here by Shiva. He says, "Oh Bhavani, look, there is great distress among these creatures. They are affected by this poison, and we have to take care of them," because he says, Sri Hari, the soul of the universe, Akhilatmanaha, he says Sri Hari is also pleased when those who are suffering are helped or taken care of, and therefore I also feel gratified when all the creation is taken care of, and therefore I am going to swallow this poison. So he nicely asks the permission of Bhavani, his consort, before he does so, again setting an example for how to also engage with one's consort while doing the most compassionate action of taking the poison. He also asks the permission of Parvati, and Parvati says, "Of course, you can do so." And then Shiva proceeds to swallow the poison. So, here again, one has to note when Chitraketu, for example, criticized Shiva having Parvati in his lap and holding her in embrace, if we apply worldly standards, then by any worldly standard, if a husband asks a wife, "Can I consume poison?" will a wife say yes to that? So the activities of Shiva and Parvati are beyond human standards, and therefore to apply such human standards even by a great devotee like Chitraketu was wrong, and that's why he was given the curse of being born as a demon. So the divine couple, Shiva and Parvati, are beyond all yardsticks, and that's why Parvati very nonchalantly says, "Yes, please go ahead and consume the poison," which is unthinkable for any wife to tell her husband, assuming she loves the husband. So here she says, "You can proceed and swallow the poison," and with the permission of Bhavani, Lord Shiva consumes the poison, and once he does so, it is said that the way he consumes it is he takes the whole poison that's spreading in all directions simply into his palm. So everything is held in his palm. He expands to hold the whole thing in his palm, and then he swallows it out of compassion, and the entire poison enters his mouth, goes into his neck, and it stops right there, making his whole neck blue. So some even say, though here Bhagavatam doesn't mention it, that but there are some other places where it is said that Mother Parvati puts her hand on the neck of Shiva so that the poison doesn't go below the neck. So the poison is thus consumed by Shiva and it is stopped in his neck. So here it says, first Evam Amantriya Bhagavan Bhavani Vishwabhavana. So he is asking Bhavani, and with Bhavani's permission, he says, he takes that poison, Tad Visham Jagtum Arebhe Prabhavagyan Avamodata. With her permission, he takes in the poison. Then Tatah Karatali Kritya Vyapi Halahalam Visham. He takes the whole poison in his palm, Karatali. And then he simply drinks it. Abhakshayan Mahadevaha Kripaya Bhuta Bhavanaha. The one with full total compassion, which is Mahadeva, Shiva, takes it. And after he does it, and after it goes to his neck, it says, Yechakara Gale Neelam. So Gale Neelam means the neck has become blue. So that is why Shiva is called as Neelakantha. Kantha means neck, and therefore Neelakantha means the one with blue neck, and that's coming because of this very pastime described in Bhagavatam, the famous episode of churning of the milk. The poison is consumed by Shiva, it goes to the neck. Mother Parvati holds it in the neck of Shiva by placing her hand on his neck, and the poison makes his neck blue, which in fact, as Bhagavatam says here, it becomes a special ornament. It is almost like he's wearing a blue garland around his neck. That is the greatness of Shiva, that the poison became a garland, and therefore he is called Neelakantha. And thereby Shiva takes care of all the problems of all these beings who are afflicted by this poison. Again, here also the symbolism is to be noted that this whole episode, as we saw, all through represents the churning of the mind as well. So, as we saw, the coming out of the poison is nothing but the intense outpouring of negative emotions in the beginning of meditation, when one actually looks within and brings forth from the subconscious all the latent tendencies, desires, and fears. Sometimes it's terrifying to see how much darkness is buried. It is also called as shadow work in some circles. The shadow is deeply buried within, and to bring the shadow out is very important before the shadow can be made into light. Many are going without even aware of their shadow, and the shadow, of course, takes over in certain situations, and that's how people get overwhelmed in certain situations with negative emotions, which they are caught unaware. But when the shadow is brought out consciously and it is transmuted into light, then one can be truly free of all these negative tendencies. But first, when the shadow is brought to light, it is like this poison coming out. And when this poison comes out, it seems so overwhelming, and it is the grace of the Supreme Guru, Adi Guru, Shiva, that can alone take this. So when this comes out, if we think it is all mine, then we will be overridden with guilt. We will feel that I am such a terrible person, that I have all these negative emotions and tendencies deeply buried within. But if we recognize that all of these is also coming from the Supreme Being, as we saw earlier, it is the Supreme Being who strengthens both the demoniac and the virtuous tendencies. And therefore, by recognizing that even these negative emotions, this poison, comes from the Supreme Being, it is part of His pastime, His Leela, and therefore it has to be offered to Him. He only can handle it. It is not mine, it all belongs to Him, and thereby offering to Him with humility, only then one can be free of it. And that is what is represented by this pastime of offering the poison to Shiva. And Shiva, Karuna Avatar, the embodiment of compassion, consumes it. And that's why it also says here that this is the activity of anyone who is truly noble. This is also an instruction that anyone who is noble, he is always compassionate towards others who are in suffering, and he takes care of them. It says here, Tapyante lokatapena sadavah prayasho janaha paramaradhanam taddi purushasya akhilatmanah. So it says here, noble souls are always afflicted at the agony of the world, and therefore taking care of the affliction of others is true worship of the Supreme Being. So what Shiva demonstrates is also an example. While there is the symbolism of offering the negative emotions to Shiva, is one aspect of it. Also, from a practical perspective, Shiva demonstrating compassion to those who are suffering is an example for us too, that we ought to always be compassionate towards those who are in suffering. And that's why Bhagavatam says here that it is the nature of sadhu, the true saint, is one who is immediately affected by the afflictions of others and takes care of it. And that is true worship of the Supreme Being as well. So, seeing this great act of Shiva, everyone is so pleased. It says that Brahma and Bhavani and all the Devatas and Lord Vishnu himself, Vaikuntascha Samshashire. So it says, the Lord, the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and all the Devas all glorify Shiva for this enormous act beyond all words. And it is also mentioned that in passing, that a little bit of poison that spilled onto earth is what resulted in poison for all the various snakes and scorpions and poisonous herbs that are found on earth. So this is another interesting tidbit from Bhagavatam, that various poisonous herbs we find, various poisonous creatures we find, derive their poison from this pastime. So that being said, the essential takeaway of this chapter is the grace of Shiva. We first saw the glorious Kurma Avatar of the Lord appearing as tortoise and protecting the mountain, and thereby exhibiting a wonderful pastime. And it is a very glorious avatar, which is even first counted as part of the Dashavatar, as the second avatar. And also, there is a special temple for this particular avatar in South India, in Andhra Pradesh. So, Kurma Avatar is a very special avatar of the Lord. We saw that. And then we saw the wonderful episode of Shiva, out of his grace and compassion, taking the Halahala poison and the symbolism behind it. With this chapter ends. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.